Conflict is regrettable business. Most people don't want to be part of it. Sometimes even governments don't want to be part of it. For years, New Delhi maintained autonomous relations with both Washington and Moscow, an act that hasn't been without its burdens. However, the times are changing. China casts a shadow over the continent, Russia strives for a multipolar order, America wants to preserve its hegemony, and the war in Ukraine pushes everyone to pick sides. In this complex, ever-changing world, India is trying to set itself apart from the competition and stake its claim in global affairs. Yet it finds itself jammed in between two partners. On one side is Russia, an irreplaceable source of military equipment and technology transfers. The other is America, an indispensable ally in containing Chinese power in Asia Pacific. However, as its partners compete over influence and power, India faces a test. Can it strike a balance between the bear and the eagle? And if not, which way will it tilt? Today's video is sponsored by Wandrium. India and China are the two juggernauts of Asia. This circle here has more people living inside than outside. There are more Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, and yes, communists living inside this circle than outside of it. Yet, ironically, this circle also holds the least sparse populated country on Earth, Mongolia. It's a mind-boggling place, and it raises a lot of questions. Wandrium holds a vast library that helps answer some of these questions you may be wondering about. It's an educational video subscription service with over 6,000 hours of video courses and documentaries. Think of it as a museum for the mind. There are dozens of documentaries that help explain the modern needs of both India and China. Here's what my watch list looks like. There are many more videos available that discuss Chinese and Indian historical angles, but I find these the most useful when researching. If you've ever wondered about anything, Wandrium will be your new favorite place, and they're giving viewers a great offer of a free trial. So check it out and look at the videos on my watch list. By subscribing to Wandrium, you'll also be helping out our channel to make more content. All politics is local, even international politics. The border in between merely represents a dividing line between two communities that see the world differently. India has had a long strategic bond with Russia and the Soviet Union before it. At heart, it's a relationship forged by calculated strategic needs at both global and regional levels. During the Cold War, New Delhi's anti-colonial stance synchronized with that of Soviet policymakers who were scouting for new allies in Asia. The Americans were doing the same, and when they allied with Pakistan in the 1950s, India's decision to team up with the Soviet Union was made all the more easier. As such, New Delhi developed strategic ties with Moscow to counterbalance the US military assistance to Pakistan. The Soviets delivered arms to India and vetoed Kashmir-related issues in the UN Security Council. It was crucial support at a crucial time. So much so that even after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the newly established Russian Federation remained India's leading international partner. And there was no reason for change at the time. The Clinton administration held an unfriendly stance towards India, still backing Pakistan on the Kashmir dispute and calling for India to roll back its nuclear and missile programs. In response, New Delhi hedged its bet and kept close to Moscow. In fact, Russian-Indian relations strengthened as India came to rely on Russian weaponry. But global politics is shifting in dramatic and unexpected ways. Right across the Himalayas, China looms large. Since the turn of the millennium, its economic, diplomatic, and military reach has grown beyond India's capacity to compete. Beijing and New Delhi have fallen at odds over strategic terrain, monetary policy, etc. China's rapid advance drove President Bush and later President Obama to fine-tune America's relationship with India by overcoming past disagreements over Kashmir and India's nuclear arsenal. Yet it was President Trump who proposed to place India at the heart of Washington's new Asia-Pacific strategy, a policy reflected in the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue that includes the United States, India, Japan, and Australia. By and of itself, India has grown strikingly closer to the United States in the past 2 decades. But that same rapprochement has upset New Delhi's dealings with Moscow. The Russians, for their part, are aware that the growing conflict between India and China has nudged the Indian leadership towards the United States. So, to remedy the situation, the Russians have suggested using the BRICS forum to encourage confidence building. But the proposal is too little, too late. Ever since India's partnership with the United States, Quad has replaced the BRICS association. The truth is that the gridlock between India and China cannot be overcome by confidence building. It is a geostrategic dispute, and deeply so. In this complex equation, India is trying to set itself apart from the competition and stake its own claim in global affairs. One bargain that hangs above the trilateral exchange is the S-400 deal. As part of its military cooperation with Russia, India has been looking to upgrade its missile defense shield. In October 2018, Russia and India signed an agreement for the supply of 5 S-400 batteries, a deal worth over $5.5 billion. India received its first batch of the anti-air missile system in November 2021, but the S-400 acquisition has raised the risk of sanctions. Washington isn't happy with the S-400 deal. It has repeatedly warned that any country that uses the S-400 system would be subject to sanctions under the CAATSA bill. The state of play is testing the diplomatic skills of Indian policymakers in balancing ties between Moscow and Washington. And even though India has tilted towards the United States in the last 20 years, the majority of India's military equipment originates from Russia, about 70% in fact. Reducing that number is difficult. Some systems are deeply tied into India's existing arsenal. The Indian armed forces is so profoundly integrated into Russian-based military systems that it is technically difficult to make use of non-Russian weaponry. However, to sweeten the S-400 deal, the Russians recently offered India their very latest anti-air missile defense system, the S-550. For reference, the S-550 is a brand new, yet largely unknown unit. New details are still emerging as of this writing. It is presumed to be a strategic missile defense system capable of hitting spacecraft, ballistic missile re-entry vehicles, and hypersonic targets at altitudes of tens of thousands of kilometers. So, the S-550 is a new class of weaponry, one meant for defense in space. It is precisely the stuff India needs to build its next-generation missile defense shield. All the same, American officials have repeatedly warned that the CAATSA bill will apply to India should the S-400 missile system, let alone the S-550, become operational. The CAATSA bill mandates the US government to impose financial sanctions and travel bans on any country transacting significant defense or intelligence deals with Russia, Iran, or North Korea. The sanctions would include canceling or blocking sales of licensed goods and technologies, but also stopping credit lines from the United States, banning banks, manufacturers, suppliers, and property transactions from the sanctioned countries. Under such pressure, international trade becomes exceedingly difficult, which is the whole point. So by law, Washington is obligated to sanction India, but the sanctions come at a decisive moment in time when America is trying to reinvent the quadrilateral security dialogue to set up a containment belt around China. However, coercion through sanctions does not always perform as intended. The fact of the matter is that imposing sanctions on India would harm US interests in Asia Pacific, and both sides know it. Prime Minister Modi's demeanor suggests that he is trying to strike a backdoor deal by using India's strategic leverage to persuade his counterpart Biden to waive CAATSA sanctions. For instance, in September 2021, India permitted an American maritime patrol aircraft to refuel from the Indian base in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, a breakthrough in joint operations. Meanwhile, a series of recently signed defense agreements look to enhance India's military ties with America through joint naval patrols, military drills, intelligence sharing, etc. New Delhi is also wooing American military contractors by offering to purchase expensive systems. The NASAM systems by Raytheon Technologies at a cost of $1 billion is one such example. India is hoping to employ the lobbying power of American military contractors to waive sanctions. So Modi is clearly trying to soften Biden's posture. But the efforts are too little. The White House is not having it. From American perspective, a waiver to India may set a contentious precedent. Since everyone is equal before the law, there should be no exceptions. A waiver to India would upset some of America's partners, where CAATSA sanctions do apply for similar S-400 deals, like Turkey. Plus, a waiver might actually encourage other nations to go ahead and sign defense deals with Russia. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Algeria, and the United Arab Emirates have suggested as much. So, from a political angle, Biden's best call is to do nothing, and instead delay the sanctions while keeping the threat of CAATSA alive. There is very little room for sentimentality in statecraft. Policy is drafted with a sense of realism. Despite the looming threat of sanctions, Indian policymakers are not willing to abandon their long-standing partnership with Russia. If at all possible, the leadership in New Delhi wants to distance itself from global conflicts, but only to the degree that it is not left out entirely. Walking a tightrope between the White House and the Kremlin is a strenuous task that requires diplomatic prowess and foresight. It's a process that hasn't been easy, especially since the Ukraine war. At the United Nations, India has so far abstained 5 times from condemning Russia's war in Ukraine, which shows that striking a balance between its two partners will get increasingly more difficult. Yet this is one impasse that India cannot afford to misconstrue. It cannot allow any power to veto its relationship with either the United States or the Russian Federation, permitting either the Russians or the Americans to dictate India's international relations would set a most precarious norm that could backfire down the line. When all is said and done, governments were designed to seek power. Yet, sometimes their actual condition makes them a servant to the powers of others. I've been your host Shirvan from Caspian Report. If you enjoy our content and want to do more, please consider joining our Patreon platform or the YouTube membership program. Joining either helps us to produce more content. Thank you for watching and Sağ ol.